Welcome to Son of a Glitch. Join us as we explore some of the internet's craziest glitch stories. Story 1. Every year on November 20th, like clockwork, Facebook pops up the same memory from 2009, going to a taping of the Dimitri Martin show. And every year, right beneath it, there's my own disappointed comment. Never mind, they cut the line off like 10 people before us. And every single year, I stare at it like I'm looking at someone else's life entirely. Because here's the unsettling part. I have no memory of this. Not even a faint, blurry trace of it. Nothing. And that doesn't make any sense. I've always been a huge Dimitri Martin fan. A chance to see him live, let alone attend a taping of his show, would have been a massive deal for me. That's the kind of thing I definitely would have remembered, even if the night ended in disappointment. The excitement of being there, the frustration of being turned away, the little burst of I should post this energy, those are all the sorts of moments that usually stick. That's how memories work for me. Usually. But not this one. The more I think about it, the stranger it feels. Where would I have even been in 2009, where they were taping the show? How would I have gotten there? Who would I have gone with? What else happened that day? My brain draws a complete blank, which is bizarre because the post clearly happened. Something did occur strongly enough that I felt compelled to announce it publicly. I even came back later to update my disappointment with the line. That means there was an experience vivid enough to react to in real time. And somehow, none of that exists in my actual memory. It's like this weird little event slipped into my timeline sideways, like it happened just outside the main flow of my reality. The post feels like a postcard mailed to me from a version of myself that I don't quite recognize. And the fact that Facebook serves it back to me every single year has started to make the whole thing feel even more dreamlike. 15 years of being reminded about something I simply cannot recall. At first, I brushed it off as one of those random lost memories. Whatever, it was 2009, I was doing a million things, maybe it got blurred into the background. But the more these yearly reminders show up, the more the whole situation feels uncanny. This wasn't some mundane, everyday detail. This was something I cared about. I was actively excited. I was physically present somewhere, enough to be 10th in line behind people who actually made it in. There were sounds, lights, other fans, movement, a sense of anticipation. There should be something there, even a fragment. But there isn't. It makes me wonder about the strange fragility of memory. How something can be significant enough at the time to post about, yet somehow slip through the cracks entirely. And not even slip away gradually. It's like the event was plucked out of my mind wholesale, leaving only the digital timestamp of its existence behind as proof. There's also this strange emotional disconnect. Whenever the memory pops up, I don't feel the echo of the original excitement or frustration. I don't think, oh yeah, I remember that night. I think, why does this feel like it happened to a stranger? It's almost eerie, like stumbling across a photograph of yourself in a place you don't remember visiting. And yet the version of me from 2009 clearly lived through something. He was in line. He was excited. He got turned away. He posted about it. He updated the post. He cared enough to share it. That person felt real emotion that day. But the memory of the event, whatever flavor it was, didn't attach itself to the place in my mind where such memories normally live. So every November 20th, Facebook hands me this tiny, inexplicable glitch in my own personal history. It's almost become a tradition now. I open the app, see the memory, feel that same quiet confusion wash over me, and sit for a moment wondering how a documented experience can feel so detached from my lived reality. 15 years later, I'm still no closer to understanding it. It's just this little annual reminder that memory doesn't always work the way we expect, or maybe that sometimes reality has seams we only notice much later. Story 2. So, I was 20 at the time this happened, and the event is strange on its own as it was then, but I will mention what happened when I was about 12. Just ignore that part if you think it's irrelevant and against the chart rules. There are other things like a premonition added in, but I think this is the best place to post this. So what happened? I was walking that tunnel pretty often, at least once a month, usually more often at that time. There's that one place close to the exit, so there's sunlight in addition to pretty faint artificial lighting. Years had passed since that event when I was around 12. I wasn't thinking about it one bit, but suddenly I remember that at the exact spot something strange happened. I think, oh yeah, that was weird, and continue. When I approach the spot, I see a beggar sitting down on a cardboard. They often use that tunnel. But the beggar looks nothing like they usually do. He sits there with a metal box with some money in it, But his clothes are somewhat strange. I cannot explain. It's something like young people could wear today cosplaying modern's elves. Nothing too outrageous, also worn out, but still weird. And his face. He was my age, about 20, with short blonde hair, but he looked just perfect in a way I cannot describe. Not like a real elf of something, but there are those people who are just so beautiful it almost hurts. His skin was like porcelain, absolutely perfect, and he looked up to me with those Instagram-worthy sky-blue eyes full of sadness. And I just couldn't believe how perfect this man sitting on his knees looked. I thought to myself, have you tried modeling, not begging? Because you rarely see people like that. But okay, maybe he had problems why he couldn't work at that age. Anything is possible. But what I did experience was a feeling of holiness, like I was in the presence of something I wasn't even supposed to see. But overall, he looked just like an incredibly beautiful, yet otherwise normal young man. And then I pass by him, and suddenly I see a movement with the corner of my eye. I look back, and he's not there. I passed him by not more than 2 m away, and I even saw the moment he disappeared, just barely. It wasn't that he could get away that fast, it was a tunnel with no doors or anything. There were just a few people in there, and when he was gone I was right there, not across the street or anything. The cardboard was still there, but he was gone just like that. And then just in addition, to make this even weirder, same thing happened when I was at exactly the same spot, this time together with my mother. There stood a terribly disfigured man with a face that terrified me. He wasn't begging for money, just standing there, but he felt evil. I am disabled myself, I don't discriminate, but that face was just all wrong, like his skin was dripping off his skull. Maybe he didn't even feel that evil, just very wrong. I asked my mother what was wrong with this person, and she said he's just sick, but I could tell she was worried. And again, right when we passed the man, I saw movement, looked back, and he's not there. Gone. And again, that's a tunnel, and both times I walked in the direction of the exit. They couldn't get out. I asked her where did he go. My mother looked back and was terrified. She said he must have ran away, but I knew she was lying. She was scared. And the thing that I thought just before I saw that young man, it was about this disfigured, weird person with his dripping off face. Didn't think about it for years, and boom, just as it happened again, I somehow felt the strange glitching feeling. I asked my mother did she remember that man disappearing, and she insisted he just ran away, but yes, she did see him. And then, when I was 20, she finally admitted that the man didn't look sick or disabled. He looked wrong, as if someone had smeared the image of a man. She didn't want to get me scared then, but she did admit it when I was 20 and told her about the young man. You can disregard the first event as I was 12. You can disregard me remembering the first event just before the second, but that young man who looked so out of place disappearing in a way that I even saw movement, that was seriously weird and glitchy. Sorry if I am overstepping, I just don't know where else to post this, but I wanted to, and at least partially it belongs here. Story 3. I barely smoke anymore, maybe once or twice a year at most. It's a rare vice, a leftover habit from when I was 13, and thought cigarettes somehow made me look older or tougher or more in control of myself. I stopped regularly years ago, but I still keep a pack around, tucked away for those moments when I'm frayed to the point of unraveling. Last night was one of those moments. My patience had scraped itself down to the bone. I didn't truly want a cigarette, not in the way an addict wants one. I know better, my lungs know better. But it was that old emotional muscle memory, that instinctive reach for something that once brought a weird kind of comfort. So I dug out the pack, fully intending to just hold it for a minute, maybe take one outside, maybe not. Then my dog needed something, water, a treat, attention. I don't even remember what specifically, just that it pulled me completely out of the moment. I put the cigarettes down somewhere while tending to that little crisis, thinking I'd pick them up again after. Except when I went back for them, they were gone. Now I live in a very small apartment, small enough that misplacing something means it can only be in about 3 possible spots. I checked all 3 immediately. When that didn't work, I checked again, slower this time, doing that methodical stare we all do when we're sure an object should be right there, but somehow isn't. Nothing. That's when I started checking the places they wouldn't logically be. Under the couch cushions, behind the microwave, in the bathroom sink drawer, inside my dog's toy basket. Places that made no sense, but still somehow felt necessary because the obvious answers were exhausted. Still nothing. The cigarettes and the lighter had vanished, and I was left doing slow circles around my apartment, getting increasingly irritated not at losing them, but at the sheer impossibility of it. This was a pack I had physically held maybe 5 minutes earlier. There was nowhere for it to hide. Eventually, I returned to my work desk, the brightest, most obvious, most open area of my place. I had already checked it multiple times. It's a flat surface, nothing to hide behind, nothing to fall under. I had even cleared a few things earlier while I was working, so I knew it wasn't there. But now, sitting right on the edge of the table, were my cigarettes and my lighter. Not lying flat the way I always leave them. Not tossed casually to one side. No, they were standing upright. Both of them. The cigarette pack was standing on its bottom edge, perfectly vertical, perfectly balanced. The lighter, too, upright, at a neat 90-degree angle from the pack, as if someone had positioned them deliberately to face me. Like two tiny little soldiers lined up for inspection. I froze. My first reaction wasn't, "Oh good, I found them." It was a cold, crawling sense of that's not how I left them. Because it truly wasn't. I am ridiculously clumsy, chronically, habitually clumsy. If something can be dropped or knocked over or knocked into, I will do it. In all my years of smoking, from 13 to now, 25 years of handling cigarette packs, I have never once placed a pack upright on its narrow edge. It's just not something my hands naturally do. And balancing a lighter upright next to it? That might as well be an Olympic event for me. If I had put them there myself, carelessly, distractedly, it would have been flat on the table with the lighter lying across the pack like it always is. If I had tossed them down in a hurry, they would have been on their side, maybe slightly askew or half sticking out from under the notebook I keep on the desk. That's my pattern. That's how I operate. But upright? Perfectly positioned? On a surface I had checked 5 times already? They didn't look forgotten. They looked placed. Intentionally. Almost helpfully. Like, hey, don't forget what you were about to do. I just stared at them, trying to figure out a rational explanation. Had I somehow done this without remembering? Had I blacked out for 30 seconds? Did my dog knock them over? No, that would make no sense. He can knock things down, not set them upright with geometric precision. It felt uncanny. Not paranormal exactly, not ghostly, just deeply unfamiliar, like catching a glimpse of your own handwriting in a style you don't recognize. Like something in the room had made a decision without consulting me. Story 4. I swear I wasn't planning to post today, but what happened to me was so bizarre that I can't get it out of my head, and now I feel like if I don't write it down, it's going to sit there buzzing in my brain all night. I was walking home like always, taking the same route I've taken 100 times. Nothing unusual. Same cracked pavement, same houses, same little convenience store on the corner with its flickering neon sign. It was one of those totally forgettable days, no drama, no big emotions, just errands and existing. My brain was in that autopilot mode where you're thinking about something else entirely, not really seeing your surroundings, just drifting. And then I saw him. At first I didn't even process what I was looking at. There was a guy standing on the sidewalk near a fence, facing slightly sideways. Average looking, hoodie jeans, nothing about him that screamed weirdo or performance artist. What got my attention wasn't him. It was what he was holding. He was holding a life-sized cardboard cat. Not a plush toy. Not a costume. Not some cute decoration. A flat, two-dimensional cardboard cutout of a cat. Like someone took a photo of a cat, printed it, mounted it on board, and cut it out around the edges. It looked like something from a school art project or a theater prop closet. Just this rigid, upright cat shape. And he had it tucked under one arm, like it was a friend tagging along. I slowed down because my brain went, what? Then, as I'm walking past, I hear him talking. Out loud. Clearly. And not in a joking voice, not like he's on a phone. He's looking at the cardboard cat and saying very seriously, "So what do you think, buddy? Should we take it or not?" He pauses, as if waiting for an answer. I am now fully staring, trying not to visibly gape. People are passing by on either side of him, someone with headphones, a woman with a grocery bag, a guy on a bike. They all just move around him like he's a lamppost. No one reacts. No double takes. No confused looks. Just me in slow motion thinking, is this for real? I glance around, expecting to see someone filming. Maybe this is some social experiment, a TikTok prank, a hidden camera show. Nothing. No one's snickering in a bush with a camera. No one's holding their phone up. It's just this man and his cardboard cat, having a genuine, one-sided conversation about a decision they apparently need to make together. I walk a few steps past him, and my brain is just spiraling. Am I the only one seeing this? Did the world glitch? Did I accidentally step into a weird indie movie? I decide to be subtle about it, so I turn my head slightly like I'm checking for traffic, just to sneak one more look. I'm curious, okay? I want to see if he keeps talking, if maybe he laughs, breaks character, something. I walk maybe 3 seconds more, no exaggeration, literally a couple of steps, and then I turn around properly. He's gone. Not walking away quickly. Not already halfway down the block. Just gone. Him and the cardboard cat. The bit of sidewalk he had been standing on is completely empty. There's nowhere he could have ducked into. No open doors, no alley directly beside him, no car pulling away. The space is just blank, like someone erased that whole little scene from reality and forgot to erase it from my memory. I literally stopped walking. Just stood there for a second, scanning around like maybe I'd missed him. Maybe he moved faster than I thought. Maybe I blinked too slow. But there's nothing. The street is back to normal, quiet and boring, like nothing strange ever happened there. And that's when it hit me how surreal it all was. The cardboard cat. The completely normal tone in his voice. The fact that nobody else reacted. The disappearing act that made absolutely no physical sense. I don't know if I walked into a simulation glitch, a mini hallucination, or the opening cut scene of some side quest I forgot to accept. But my brain still refuses to process it neatly. It just keeps replaying that one line. So what do you think, buddy? And the image of that flat cardboard cat under his arm. Has anyone else ever had a moment so surreal it felt like reality slipped a frame, and you were the only one who noticed? Story 5. This happened about 4 years ago, and it just popped back into my mind recently. One of those memories that hits you out of nowhere and makes you go, wait, what actually happened there? Back then I had this little speaker, about the size of a Rubik's Cube. Nothing special, just a small Bluetooth thing I'd plug into my laptop whenever I wanted better sound for movies. Me and my ex were watching something one night, sitting on this old couch I kept in my room. The speaker was right there on the couch with us, literally between 2 cushions, playing perfectly fine. Then suddenly silence. No low battery beep, no crackling fade out, no sign it had disconnected. It was just on 1 second and completely dead the next. We both paused the movie and looked at each other like, did you turn it off? We start feeling around the cushions. Nothing. We check the floor. Nothing. Under the couch. Behind it. Inside the blankets on top. I even checked the pockets of my hoodie like maybe I absent-mindedly grabbed it, even though that made 0 sense. The speaker was just gone. And it wasn't small enough to slip into invisibility, it was a chunk of plastic. You'd notice it. For years I told myself it must have somehow fallen under the couch or gotten wedged somewhere weird. The human brain makes excuses when something doesn't make sense. But 2 years later, I actually moved that couch across my room. I lifted it, tilted it, dragged it, no speaker. Not a single sign of it. Then last year I finally got rid of that couch. Took it apart piece by piece to throw it out. Foam, wooden frame, fabric, everything. I was literally dismantling it while thinking, I'm absolutely going to find that speaker in here. Nope. It wasn't in the lining, the springs, the frame, nothing. It was nowhere inside it. A couple months ago I moved into a new place, and every single piece of furniture and every box came with me. I cleaned everything, emptied drawers, packed every loose item. If that speaker still existed anywhere in my stuff, I would have seen it. But I never did. It vanished that night and never reappeared. To this day, I have no explanation for where it went. Story 6. My grandfather only ever told the story once. He's not the kind of man who exaggerates. He's small, wiry, the color of baked earth, with calloused hands and a face folded into permanent frown lines from years under the sun. He doesn't drink, doesn't gossip, doesn't even like scary movies. When he says something happened, you either believe him or you call him a liar to his face, and nobody in my family is brave enough to do that. We were in his little house in northern Mexico, the one with the cracked cement floor and the Virgin of Guadalupe watching from the wall. It was late, the air warm and heavy. Outside, the crickets were screaming. The power had gone out in the town again, so we sat at the table with a single candle between us, a pool of orange light in all the darkness. Te voy a cantar algo, he said suddenly, staring not at me but at the flame. I'd been bugging him all morning to tell me one of the crazy stories from his youth. I thought I'd finally worn him down. What kind of something? I asked. He licked his lips, thinking. De cuando el tiempo se rompió, he answered quietly. From when time broke. He was in his 20s back then, working as a vaquero. He and a handful of other men had been hired to tend cattle on a ranch out by some low hills, where the scrub and rocks turned the land into a tangle of thorns and shadows. The air always smelled like dust, hot metal, and animal sweat. Days meant blazing sun and long hours. Nights meant coyotes howling and distant, lonely bells. They weren't real mountains, he told me. No más unos cerros chiquitos. But there was this one with a little cave like a mouth in the stone. We used to eat there sometimes, in the shade. There was a man in their group named Esteban. Young, with a laugh that came too easily and eyes that never took anything seriously. He had a tiny baby goat that followed him around, a scrawny thing with a bell on its neck. El chivo travieso. My grandpa chuckled without humor. Siempre así nos iba. Every day at lunchtime, the men would herd the cattle toward the hills, sit under the scant shade, and unwrap tortillas and beans from cloth, passing canteens of lukewarm water, a shared cigarette here and there. Flies buzzing. The sun pounding. The goats and cows chewing dry grass. That afternoon, the heat was worse than usual. The sky had that blinding white glare that makes the world look faded and flat. The men were quiet and sleepy, their jaws moving lazily. Only Esteban's goat had any energy, tugging and tugging at its rope until it slipped free and trotted away, bell tinkling. Chingadu, Esteban muttered, stuffing the last bite of tortilla in his mouth and pushing himself up. Ya vengo no es mi durman. My grandfather watched him chase after the goat, up the slope of the small hill. The goat headed straight for the cave. It was just a shallow opening in the rock, dark but not deep, the kind kids might dare one another to step into. The goat ran in. Esteban followed. And then he didn't come back. At first, we didn't notice, my grandpa said. Because we were tired. The heat makes you slow. But after a little while, I realized we were one voice short. He called out, Oy Esteban. Ya dijalo, hombre ven a comer. No answer. One of the older men laughed and said the boy was probably taking a leak. Minutes passed. The laughter faded. Someone squinted up at the hill. The goat's bell was no longer ringing. The mouth of the cave sat black and still. Ven vamos a ver, one of the men said. They walked up in a loose line, boots crunching on stone, flies still swirling around them. The closer they got, the cooler the air felt, a strange kind of relief from the heat. My grandfather remembers that clearly, the way the hairs on his arms rose even though he was grateful for the chill. Esteban, they called. Y assault. No estés llegando. Silence. The cave wasn't much wider than a doorway, no more than a few meters deep, as far as any of them had ever seen. It was where they sometimes stored tools or sat with their backs against the stone. A safe, boring place. No stories. No legends. But that day, it had a weight and a tension like something inside was carefully listening. One of the men went in first, ducking under the edge. My grandpa followed. The air inside smelled of stone and old dust. Their eyes adjusted quickly. The cave was exactly as they remembered, empty. No goat. No Esteban. Just the curved rock and the faint light from outside. No había nada, my grandpa said, voice low. Nada. They searched around the hill, calling for him until their throats were hoarse. They checked for holes, ravines, anything he might have fallen into. Nothing. It was as if he'd walked into the cave and dissolved. They called the ranch owner, who called the policia. The police came, skeptical and tired, but did a full search anyway. Helicopters were too expensive. This was just a missing ranch hand, not a politician's son. So it was men on foot, some on horseback, dogs sniffing the dry air. No tracks. No body. No blood. No torn fabric. Just that cave, small and indifferent. People started saying he ran away. My grandpa told me. Que si fue pa'l norte. But he had nothing, amigo. No money. No family up there. And why would the goat disappear, too? Months passed. The men went back to their work. The owner needed cattle moved. Life kept grinding forward. But every time they passed the hill, they gave it a wider berth. No one ate near the cave anymore. My grandpa avoided looking at it directly. The way you look away from a person you're afraid will look back. A year later, almost to the day, my grandfather and the others were tending cattle in the same area. The wind was up, carrying dust in long, angry streaks. He said there was tension in the air, like before a storm, although the sky stayed painfully clear. He heard shouting. Two men on the far side of the field were waving their arms, yelling his name and pointing toward the hill. For a moment, my grandfather thought there'd been an accident, that maybe someone had finally slipped and broken a leg. His chest clenched as he ran, boots hammering against the dried earth. And then he saw him. Standing at the base of the small hill, right outside the mouth of the cave, was Esteban. Same faded checkered shirt. Same sweat-stained hat. Same scuffed boots. Dust on his pants, as if he'd just knelt down to tie his laces. In his hand, tugging stubbornly on the rope, was the tiny goat, the bell around its neck glinting dull silver. The goat hadn't grown at all. "Guy, donde te metiste?" one of the men yelled, half furious, half relieved. "Te desapareces como un ano." Esteban frowned. "Que chingados dices? Apenas me metí por el chivo." "What? What the hell are you talking about?" "I just went in for the goat." He swore he'd only been inside an hour, fighting with the animal as it tried to go deeper, and then talking with a man who was already there. A stranger sitting calmly in the dim light, leaning against the rock like he'd been waiting. "Dijo que mi platico toda mi vida," my grandpa murmured to me. He told me he talked about his whole life. The man in the cave had known Esteban's childhood, his mother's name, the scar on his knee from falling off a bicycle, the way his father died. He even mentioned secrets Esteban claimed he'd never told anyone. The time he stole money from his uncle, the girl he'd gotten pregnant in another town. He talked like he'd been there every moment, Esteban told them, voice shaking. "Como es I siempre me hubiera estado viendo." And then, according to Esteban, the man in the cave smiled and said, "Bueno yo es hora." Well, it's time. The goat stopped struggling. The stranger told him he could go. Esteban stepped back toward the entrance and found himself outside, blinking in the sunlight, everyone yelling at him. An hour, he insisted. Just one weird, long conversation. That was all. But to the others, a full year had passed. When my grandpa finished telling me this, the candle had burned down almost to nothing. Shadows swallowed the corners of the kitchen. Outside, a dog barked once and then went quiet, like it had thought better of it. "Did you ever see the man in the cave?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yo no," he said. "Why no quiero volo?" "Me no. And I don't want to." "Did he change?" I asked. "After." My grandpa nodded slowly. Esteban never laughed the same way again. He worked in silence, refused to go near the hills. He woke up screaming some nights, yelling that someone was still talking to him from the dark. Years later, he died in another town, drunk and alone, still swearing he'd only lost an hour. My grandpa looked at me then, finally pulling his gaze away from the dying candle. "Te levo mañana," he said. "Te enseño el cerro. La cuevita todavía está allí." He did, and standing in front of that low hill, staring at the dark mouth in the rock, I understood why nobody goes near it anymore. The cave itself isn't impressive. It's small, ordinary, almost laughable. But the closer you get, the colder the air becomes. The sounds around you muffle a little, like someone's turned the volume down on the world. And if you stand there long enough, you can't shake the feeling that something inside is waiting. Not for just anyone. For someone whose life it already knows. Story 7. They still call it La Noche de la Luz in the valley. Sunil is one of those places in Argentina that the maps barely bother with. A handful of houses, a slow road, the mountains like sleeping giants around you. In summer the dust sticks to your skin. In winter the wind slices your ears. People live between the church, the almacen, and the small school. News travels faster than the collectivos. That night there was a birthday. Or maybe an anniversary. People argue about that part now. What they all agree on is that the boy Lucio was 13 and shy, with 2 long arms and that awkwardness that comes the year before you grow into yourself. The gathering was at his aunt's house. String lights, plastic chairs, cumbia on a cheap speaker, kids running in and out tracking dirt onto the tiles. The air smelled like grilled meat and cheap wine. Adults sat in a loose circle in the patio, talking over each other, football, politics, someone's cousin in Buenos Aires who got a good job and now acted keto. Lucio sat near the door, bouncing his leg, picking at the label of his soda bottle. He liked his family, but crowds made him feel like the air was thinner. Every laugh sounded too loud. Every question too direct. "You okay, Nene?" his mother asked, leaning toward him. "Si ma voy un ratito a lo de la tía Marta, a buscar el cargador," he said softly. He'd forgotten his phone charger at another relative's house, barely 50 meters down the dirt lane. He wanted the excuse to leave, to walk alone under the stars for a few minutes. "Está bien. Volve rápido," she said, already turning back to a story. He stepped out into the street. The music from the patio muffled as the door closed behind him. Crickets shouted from the weeds, the sky stretched dark and huge, shot through with cold stars. He shoved his hands into his hoodie pocket and started walking. The dust puffed up under his sneakers. The night smelled like dry earth and distant eucalyptus. He could see his Aunt Marta's house ahead, simple, low, a single dim light glowing behind a curtain. Behind him, the front door of the party house opened again. Che Lucio espera. His older cousin Diego jogged out, cursing softly as the warped door stuck in the frame. Esta puerta de mierda. He gave it a hard shove, and it closed with a dull thunk. Yo te acompaño, Diego called. La levesi traba boludo. Lucio stopped and turned. Diego was only a few meters behind, struggling with the lock. Lucio could see him clearly in the weak yellow light spilling from the doorway, half inside, half out. And then everything changed. Later, everyone would say it the same way. The moment the door clicked, a light appeared. For Lucio, it began as a warmth on the back of his neck, like someone had opened an oven behind him. The air thickened. The night sounds dampened. A bright white glow spilled over his shadow, out of nowhere, washing the road and his sneakers in colorless brilliance. Diego, he started, turning his head. He never finished the word. The light swallowed the world. It wasn't like a car's headlights, or lightning, or the harsh glare of a hospital room. It was more like being inside the sun itself, no edges, no directions, just white everywhere. His body went weightless, stomach flipping as if he'd missed a step on stairs that weren't there. He tried to yell, but his voice didn't exist anymore. He couldn't feel his tongue, his chest, his hands. There was no body to belong to. There was only the sense of falling without moving. Somewhere inside that brightness, something hummed. A low vibration, like power lines in summer. And under that, almost too soft to catch, he thought he heard voices. Not words. Not Spanish. Just bits of sound, overlapping, babbling, whispering, layered in a way that made his skin crawl even though he couldn't feel his skin. Then nothing. The next thing he knew, he was freezing. Not just cold, bone-deep, teeth-chattering cold. His vision snapped into focus, and he was sitting on a metal bench. A harsh light buzzed overhead, yellow and sickly. Wind hit his face, smelling of exhaust and wet concrete. He blinked, breath hitching. The stars were gone. The familiar houses were gone. In front of him stretched an empty road, dark fields beyond. A bus stop sign leaned at an angle. A timetable was nailed beside it, flapping slightly. He stood up too fast, knees shaking. The world tilted around him. "Que, donde?" he muttered, stumbling to the edge of the road. The sign listed destination names he knew. Hernandez, the next town over, then farther places he'd only ever heard adults mention. This bus stop was at the edge of Sunil's route, near the highway. It was kilometers away from his aunt's house. His phone vibrated in his pocket, jerking him back. He fumbled it out with numb fingers. Mama flashed on the screen. He answered. "Lucio, ¿dónde estás? ¿Qué te pasó? Dios mío, nene." Her voice was shrill, words tripping over each other. He could hear other voices in the background, panicked, shouting questions. He looked around again, heart pounding against his ribs. The metal of the bench glinted in the yellow light. There was the chipped paint. The crumpled cigarette packets on the ground. Estoy en la parada," he stammered. "La de afuera, la que está por la ruta. No sé cómo leg." There was a collective cry on the other side of the line. Someone swore. Someone else said, "No puede ser." His mother told him to stay put, that they were coming ya mismo. Those 10 minutes waiting were the longest of his life. Every gust of wind felt like fingers brushing his neck. Every distant dog bark made his muscles twitch. He kept expecting the light to bloom again, to take him somewhere else. He couldn't bring himself to sit down. He paced in small, tight circles, sneakers crunching gravel, breath clouding in front of him. When the family's battered car finally lurched into view, its headlights cutting across the stop, Lucio almost cried from relief. His mother jumped out before the engine was off, running toward him, grabbing his face with both hands, as if to make sure he was real. "Que te hicieron? ¿Dónde estabas?" she sobbed. The others, his father and uncle Diego, hovered behind, eyes wide. They all looked different, rumpled, sweaty, frantic, like they'd just lived through an entirely separate night. Back at the house, the chaos split into overlapping stories. Diego swore he'd only looked away from Lucio for a few seconds, fighting with the warped door. When he finally slammed it shut and turned around, Lucio was gone. Vanished. No footsteps, no running silhouette, just empty dirt road. They'd searched the whole lane and both houses. Upstairs, downstairs, under beds, behind trees. Neighbors came out with flashlights. Someone called the police. 10 minutes later, Lucio's phone rang back from the bus stop. "Yes, impossible," the police chief muttered when he heard. A sturdy man named Diego too, with tired eyes and a notebook tucked into his arm. "Son más de 6 kilómetros. A pie no liga en 10 minutos en I corriendo." In the living room, Lucio sat on a couch, a blanket wrapped around him. His teeth chattered, though no one else seemed cold. They kept asking him the same thing. What happened? He tried to explain. The warmth. The light. How the stars disappeared. How there were voices, maybe, or something like them. How there was no walking, no running, no bus, no car, just there and then here. His father kept rubbing his face. His mother crossed herself every few seconds. His uncle whispered, Debe ser cosa del diablo, o de los de arriba. Na boludo, another relative said, trying for humor and failing. Seguro fue un ovni. A UFO. The police chief wrote it all down, jaw tight. He would later give a statement saying that the witness accounts matched, that various family members confirmed the precise timing and distance, that no physical evidence of a vehicle or third party was found. For Lucio, none of that mattered. What haunted him wasn't the distance. It was the feeling that the light hadn't just moved him. It had noticed him. At night, in the weeks after, he woke up gasping, convinced his bedroom had gone white again. In the silence he could almost hear the hum, the half-formed not words.